Really excited to introduce our speaker for today. So his name is Michael Broomer, and he is the Vice President of the Experian Data Breach Resolution Group and Consumer Protection at Experian. So this group is in charge of leading businesses and helping prepare them for data breaches and mitigating consumer risk following any breach incidences. So he's been doing this for over 35 years, and we are so thrilled that he's willing to share his time with all of us today to share more about how you can protect yourself during a job search and just in general in your daily life. So I'll hand it over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thanks for having me. And I'm enlisting Hiba is actually going to be my valued assistant, being able to keep me on track with my presentation. So why don't we start with putting that up, Hiba, and hopefully everybody can see that. If you go on to the next page, as Amanda said, I've been working for Experian the last 10 years, responsible for the global data breach business. And I also have the title as a spokesperson for Experian, being the Vice President of Consumer Protection. One of the things, identity theft has been around for ages and ages, and I'm going to talk through that. This particular slide takes you through the overview, and I'm really going to talk about background. I'm going to talk about why and how criminals make their money. And then, as Amanda said, the big benefit, not only for job hunting, and the focus of this presentation is to help you avoid identity theft during the job hunting process, but also how to protect yourself in your daily life, because identity theft not only is costly, but it takes so much time if you are a victim of identity theft to clean it up without having the help of a restoration agent, which is part of what Experian provides. And I'll talk about this at the end. I'm going to be happy to give each one of you a free 1-year membership in our Identity Works identity theft protection product. We'll get that to you through Dress for Success, but I want to make sure that you at least have a free 1-year membership that you can sign up for, and it will help you. But we'll talk through that, and I'll give you some self-help tips, of course, along the way. The one thing I would like to say before I jump in is, if you do have questions, don't hold them toward the end. You're welcome to go ahead and put them in the chat, and Amanda and Hiba will let me know, and we'll just interrupt and I'll answer them as best I can on the spot. And then, of course, you can wait till the end. If you have other questions, we'll do that as well. So Hiba, if you would go ahead and turn to the next slide, we're going to start out with a little audience participation. So the first question is, which of the following is the most reported form of identity theft? And this is currently in 2020. A, stolen credit cards, B, government documents fraud, C, insurance fraud, or D, fake driver's license. So if you want to go ahead, please go ahead and put your answer in. Somebody's saying turn the volume up a little bit. Let's see if I can get any louder. That helps and makes it a little bit better. Okay, let me look in the chat. Lots of different answers all across the board. We have lots of different representation. Well, Hiba, let's go on to the next slide and I'll give you the answer. It is actually government documents fraud, the #1 identity theft complaint in 2020. Now, most people will get that confused at times because actually credentials, your username and password, is by many studies the most compromised form of identity theft, where it starts. At the same time, there's also tons of credit card cloning credit card, remastering credit card stolen easily because you use your credit card all the time. But because in 2020, and this is important to think about when you think about job hunting, that the benefits information that was transferred during COVID with all the benefits from the US government, state government, and that you were required to provide documentation, and those documents passing hands in fraudulent sites or being stolen were actually the #1 cause or identity theft complaint in 2020. Listed below the first bullet point, there are just some other examples of identity theft. I mentioned credit cards, new account fraud, which would be taking credentials from another person to open new accounts in their name, check fraud, insurance fraud, all sorts of financial schemes. It could also involve healthcare for people that don't qualify or don't have healthcare insurance, taking that information to get healthcare coverage. And then, of course, basic identity cards and driver's license activity as well. All of that falls under the umbrella of identity theft, or in the largest sense, some type of fraud.
Michael, I have a question about credit clinic, credit clinic activity. What do you mean there? You mean like a reparative, like you go in to try to get help with the credit clinic, and then that alerts people that are like trolling for your info? How does that work?
Yes. So credit clinic activity, and I have to also give a shout out to Rod Griffin, who's one of my peers at Experian as a consumer advocate, because this is his presentation that he's done many times, and I'm quite frankly plagiarizing it. Yeah, he was nice enough to share it with me. And he talks about credit clinics, which is under the general umbrella of credit repair. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, with people out of job, out of work, having not gotten many government benefits or been displaced, there were a lot of people that took a hit to their credit score or their credit history because of that, missed payments and that. So some people will try to do a fast fix and go into a credit clinic or credit repair online. And I would say, unfortunately, about 25 to 30% of all those companies aren't reputable, and all they're set up to do is steal your information and not help you. So that's where that credit clinic activity we're referring to there is a fraudulent credit repair operation.
Okay, I understand. So if there are services out there that may not be credit repair, but they're like to help, you establish credit. For example, I pay my cable bill, I pay my rent, and it goes through this online platform, and it's legitimate. Is that okay? And is that legitimate? Like, do you see numbers go up, or is that later on in this presentation?
I don't address those specifically, but I can answer your question by saying is that the first thing to do is, if you have any questions about your credit, it's always good to go ahead and have a reference to an organization that you're going to work with. Check the Better Business Bureau, check to see if they have any complaints. You can always call Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax, one of the 3 major credit bureaus, and ask about that. I would always check them out before you use any services. Even if it's an online services and it's well advertised, some of them are not as secure or not as reputable as others. So I would always do some reference checking before I jumped in and did anything that's going to help my credit score or clean up my credit report.
Great, got it. Thank you. My apartment complex sent it to me, but I didn't do due diligence on my side, but it seems to be working. I was just curious. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, Hiba, let's go on to the next slide. So how do criminals obtain your identifying information? And again, I'll use the term PII, which is personal identity information. You could also have PHI, which is personal health information. You'll hear those terms. These are pieces of information from your identity that are stolen or compromised and are used to commit identity theft by taking that information. And these are, I won't list all of these, but these are examples of incidents or events where identity information is stolen. It could be as simple as the physical mail theft, shoulder surfing, stealing your data off of a public Wi-Fi that isn't secure, stolen computers, laptops, desktops. About 40% of all identity theft in the US occurs from family and friends because it's a crime of opportunity and people are generally in the familial or relative or friend circle trusting of that. And you'd be surprised how many people have their information from stolen from them from someone close to them. Skimmers, I'll come back to. Skimmers are devices where you have a credit card or debit card that's offered up on a gas pump or an ATM, where it's a physical device that will read off of a credit or debit card the secure information to be able to clone that credit card or resell that credit card on the dark web. And then, of course, we want to talk about some of the functions during a job search where you may have to provide personal information. You've got to be very careful about who you speak to on the phone, and you shouldn't be giving out any information over the phone. They may ask about past personnel records. You shouldn't be giving those out. And we'll talk about ways to protect you there. But these are just a broad set of examples where information can be stolen about your identity. Next slide. The second audience poll question, let's see if we can do better here. The dark web is A, smaller than the surface web, B, larger than the surface web, or C, easily accessed. And the dark web is where criminals buy and sell stolen information. So I see a lot of people coming in here. I have not seen too many wrong answers. Most people are picking B, and B is absolutely correct. If you go on to the next slide, so the three areas of the web that I'll talk about, and I want you to picture here in your mind an iceberg. An iceberg has about 15% of its mass above the water, but about 85% below the water that you can't see. And that is really kind of the components between surface web is about 15% of the entire internet. It's what you see. It can be accessed just by a simple Google search, but that's only 15% of the internet. The dark web and the deep web are the 85% you can't see, and it requires special access. The deep web are those password protected sites like Experian.com, like your Bank of America, your insurance company, your Favor account. That's considered the deep web because you have credentials, a username and password, plus maybe a secondary form of authentication required to get there. But the dark web is an area of the web that you can only get to by a specific specialized browser. The most famous one is called the Tor browser, T-O-R. It's very secure, it's anonymous, but it's a place where criminals hang out, buying and selling this information. And for all of you on the phone, I would not recommend trying to go there. There's too many pitfalls. It's a bit like going into a contaminated area where you know the coronavirus is going to be around. You're sure to have something bad happen. And so I would not recommend it. But at least you know when we talk about the dark web, that's the the underground web. It takes a special browser to get there, and it's where they buy and sell stolen identity information. Let's go on to the next page. So who's there? Pretty obvious that the hackers are there. You have organized crime, you have nation states, and the 4 nation states that are behind most of all hacking that occurs country to country are Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. And so, as they say in the bottom of the slide, if you don't know how to get to the dark web, it's probably a good thing, because then you won't go there. So I'll just leave it at that. Next slide. So I think identity theft is a big issue for all of us. There were 1.4 million reports of identity theft to the Federal Trade Commission in 2020, over $3.3 billion lost to fraud. And the median dollar loss across all of those was at least $311. But in the case where we're talking about identity theft and hunting for a job, I know people that have had their identity stolen through the job hunting process because they were careless. Not only did they not get their job, but they also had months and months of trying to recover either funds or information to be able to protect their identity going forward so it didn't happen again. And again, one of the things I alluded to was it takes a long time. In some cases, victims can spend up to 200 hours to restore their identity. At Experian, and I'm going to provide, again, I'll provide you with a free 1-year membership to our identity theft protection product for attending this webinar. Our fraud resolution agents that are part of that membership that you will get, their average time to help you recover identity theft issues is about 45 minutes. So a professional that knows what they're doing can really help you and talk you through regardless of what the issue is. It doesn't matter if it's identity theft through the job hunting process. It could be a stolen credit card. It could be someone, giving you a mortgage refinancing option that's too good to be true. There may be a number of different ways, but I'll come back to that in a little bit. So let's go on to the next slide, which is our third and last audience poll question. Which group lost more money to fraud than any other in 2020? A, millennials, B, Generation X, or C, seniors? Lots of quick answers coming in. Well, 90% of you are correct. It's seniors. All of us, all of the groups suffered identity theft, but it shows you that by about $50 million margin in dollar losses, and again, this is from the Federal Trade Commission, those ages 60 to 69 lost 290 million to identity theft. And the oldest group, 80 and over, lost an average of $1,300 per individual. Then you can see for Generation Y and Generation Z, identity theft is a crime of opportunity. People go after seniors because they're most susceptible. They don't understand technology. They also have generally the higher net worths because they've worked for all those years, are in the retirement. And so identity theft is going after the money and following the money. That's why seniors are most targeted. Again, not familiar with technology, may be susceptible to a phone scam, whether it's a phishing scam or other social engineering, and they have the most means. Next slide. Oh, I forgot, there is one more audience poll question. So this one's a giveaway, and if anybody gets this one wrong, then I'm going to kick you off the Zoom call. So the question is, you can fully protect yourself against becoming a identity theft victim. So true or false? Can you fully protect yourself? I already saw one that I'm going to kick off the webinar. I'm not going to mention her name. Now I see two. The answer is false. You never can. You can do everything right and still be a victim of identity theft. But the goal here is actually for me to give you some tips, because even if you do everything right, you still may suffer identity theft, but it will be less frequent and it will be actually much less invasive and easier to fix. Here's some basic tips, and these apply to you as a person not hunting for a job, but particularly if you're hunting for a job. Is number one, never provide your social security number unless you're sure who you're providing it to. If anybody requests it over the phone, the best thing to do is to say, hey, I'm happy to provide it, but I'd like to be directed to a website where I can put that information in. And I want to make sure that website is secure. Never carry your social security card, or for that matter, your important government documents in your purse or wallet. Leave them at home. And then make sure, if you're going to provide any documents, you go ahead and, if you're making copies of those, let the person see those documents, make copies, and then shred the documents as soon as they're completed with them. You don't want unshredded documents with personal identity information hanging around. So those are some basic tips, and I'll come to more, but I'll keep throwing these in during the course of the presentation. So let's go on to the next slide. So here's some other tips.
Hello, excuse
me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
So hi, and thank you for this presentation. So sure. I heard you say that you show the documents, which is what I did on yesterday. And then they said, well, I say, all you said is that you needed to see that I had my documents on me. So I'm showing you. And then I said, why do you need to make a copy? And all you needed to do was see them. So you said to show you, make your own copy. So I needed this for like a school record. The same driver's license that I carried was on file already. She just said she needed to copy it again. Is that like legal even when something like that happens? And or when something like that happens, is it necessary for you to have to give the same document that you know is on file already because it has not changed?
It depends. I can't comment on the legality because I don't know the agency that, or the place where you were providing the information. But under that circumstance, Carissa, I would have said, no, you already have it on file and there's no reason for me to give you that again. So I always say no. It's just like, I'll use the example of the doctor's office. If I go into, let's say, a new specialist that I've been referred over to, the first thing they're going to ask me is for my driver's license and my social security number. They don't need either of those to provide me any medical services. What they need them for is when I pay the bill and I would potentially have it go to collection, they're using it to track me down. But I can refuse to provide my driver's license and my social security number and or a credit card to them until I pay the bill, of course, but I can refuse that and they still have to provide medical services to me.
Wow. So it's all about knowing the law, because I went into a doctor's office and the same thing happened. And it was almost as if I was making a scene, because I said, why do you need my driver's license? I said, I'm a victim of identity theft. My son has been getting care since he's been an infant. He is now 14. Why do you need the same driver's license just because it's a different location? Ma'am, this is our policy. So it's all about not being intimidated because you hear certain jargon to where it's almost like, okay, am I being unreasonable here? And then I'm thinking to myself, the debate in the waiting room was, I'm already a victim of identity theft. Like, this is never going to go away, because now here in 2021, I've left my driver's license again at a new facility that I may never come back to. And they're telling me that it's necessary. So already 2 times in the last 2 weeks, I've left my document that 2 agencies already have on file. They just led me to believe they needed it for a new response of care or new admission of help. So that's good to know. That is not always
Yes, absolutely. And you have the right to be able to go back and push back if they're asking for it, denying you those services, to say, please show me where I have to provide these to be given services. And they will, in most cases, they will come back and they say, well, I know it's our policy, we'll make an exception. They'll back down, but stand strong, because you are giving your quote unquote life away when you give up your driver's license, social security card, other government ID, passport. So you're doing the right thing, and your advice is good to the other people on the webinar as well.
Yes, and she led me to believe, because she was the clinical manager, and then she used the word process, which I'm aware of all of it. I was thinking to myself, like, okay. And then even after I left, I had the audacity to want to email her and apologize for the way that I behaved. And I was like, that is still my identity. So I never sent the email, because I said, no, I have been opened up to the same identity theft that I am now 10 years later still trying to clean up. I just sent a letter to the IRS from about 10 years of someone using my children's income tax, like getting income tax benefits. And it's so frustrating. I never did anything about it. And until this year, like with all those different stipends coming out, I was like, I have not even benefited from that because of my past of someone using one of my children's social security numbers. So it is really, really hectic and frustrating to clean it up.
A great lesson for all of us. Chris, I want to go through this slide, but thank you so much for sharing your testimony.
Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. Some of the recommendations on this slide apply, as I think I said earlier, not only for job hunting, but also just general. So any of your transactions that you do online, you can look in the browser input, and you can see if it is a secure site, it should always start with HTTPS, and the S stands for secure. And if you don't see that, or you don't see the little lock up there, that site may not be secure. So I wouldn't give any information. I wouldn't give any credit card, payment information, bank account information on any sites that don't have that, let alone if they even have a reputable name, because some of the names, whether it's Amazon, Bank of America, Target, they all can be spoofed. But be very careful when you're transacting online. Don't respond to any unsolicited emails requesting personal information. Don't click on any links. I don't care if it's coming from someone that you know or someone you expect it may be coming from, unless you've spoken to that individual in the last 30 minutes or an hour and they say, hey, I'm going to send you this link. It's okay. It has to do with this job search. That's probably legit. But so many people, especially if you have your job or resume posted on a social site, they'll go, oh, she's or he is job hunting, and they're going to try to spoof you. So don't go ahead and click on any links or offer any information to people that you haven't spoken to specifically in the recent past, and 30 minutes to an hour. And then again, if somebody calls you asking for information and you're suspicious, say, hey, I'm sorry, please give me your phone number. I'd like to call you back. You initiate the phone call versus them. Generally, they're not going to give out. They're going to hang up and they'll go away. But it's simple things like that, especially during the job hunting process, that you should pay attention to. Question came in the chat. what do I do if I get a solicitation email? The best thing is for solicitations, especially for jobs, is not to click on any links or not to open anything up unless, again, you're sure that person has sent it to you. And if you see it's from a particular website or company, don't open it up, but you can go to that website, you can make the inquiry on your own. You're initiating the transaction, but versus someone else that's trying to initiate and steal information from you. So those are just some basic tips. So let's go on. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the role of credit reports. Remember that credit reports can be accessed if someone steals your credentials, but credit reporting, an agency, whether it's Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, is there to actually help you. We are the reporting agency. We don't create what is reported to us. So the bank that tells us, hey, you've just opened a new loan, or the retailer that says, hey, you've just applied for a line of credit, or the government agency that says, hey, you have a new passport and here's the passport number. We just report it, but we can also see what is posted to your report, whether it's fraudulent or not. So checking your credit report and getting a free copy of your credit report from each credit bureau is allowed under annualcreditreport.com. And you can go once a year and get a copy of your credit report from each one of the agencies by going there and requesting it. And you should be doing that on a regular basis, especially if you're starting to job hunt, because before you start job hunting, and many organizations now will require you to provide access to credit report because they want to look at your financial stability, and that for certain jobs, especially if you're handling money, you want to make sure you don't have any issues on your credit file, as well as any fraud going on before you start that job search. Next slide. So review that credit report annually. If you have an application decline, you see a statement or a input on that credit file that doesn't make any sense, you can always go ahead and contact the credit reporting agency and or the creditor to question that. When I give you the free service for monitoring your credit, which is called Identity Works, you'll have a 1-800 number to call anytime with any issue, and a professional fraud resolution agent can answer any questions, let alone if they suspect you may be suffering identity theft, they can help you fix that. Again, it's no cost to you whatsoever. Next slide. So what's really important with identity theft, if you think that you are a victim identity theft, you should absolutely contact the credit agency or the creditor where you suspect it may happen. So if it's at your bank, you can always contact the bank. If you see it's on the credit file and it's from your insurance company, you can contact the credit reporting agency to say, oh, I think this is on my credit file. What do I need to do? And we can walk you through the steps of that process. But it's also important, if you think you're a victim, to do two other things: is notify law enforcement. In this case, it would probably be your local police department. 5 years ago, many of these local law enforcement agencies didn't have an identity theft section, but now most, if not all, do in the major metropolitan areas. But then also fill out a Federal Trade Commission affidavit, which says you were a victim of identity theft. Not only will it give you some access to other free resources, but it also helps checking and reporting and tracking identity theft. So there are a couple questions coming in the chats. One about text message from Chase. If you're getting a strange text message from your bank, ignore it. You can call your bank on your own and initiate that, but don't respond to it, because there are also phishing texts that will have a link to click on that could download something bad onto your cell phone or of your computer. Again, I'm seeing lots of questions like, hey, I don't think it's my bank, or why they contacted me. Be like Carissa said earlier, you've got to be suspicious and you've got to push back and initiate that contact on your own. If you think it's suspicious, more often than not, it very well may be. Next slide. So how do you start the process of going through and requesting an initial security alert from the credit agencies? And each one of the credit reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, will have an automated system. And you can go ahead and place an initial security alert, which will actually allow a notice to be put on your credit file. So if someone comes in and tries to add something new, they will have a tougher time doing it. It's not foolproof, but it's an initial, think of it red, green, and yellow like a stoplight. Instead of green, it's fine to go ahead and add something to the credit report. This is a yellow caution light, and the credit reporting agency, and or if they see a fraud, a security alert or a fraud alert put on there, they will actually contact you if, let's say, a new mortgage company is trying to say, hey, you just took out a mortgage for $200,000. These last for a year, but they are an initial form of being able to stop some sort of fraud or identity theft. So that's the first step. Next slide. I talked about the availability at annualcreditreport.com of the free credit report. You can also get fraud recovery and assistance information, and there are websites both at annualcreditreport.com and at each one of the credit reporting agencies for self-help. And you can also say, hey, when you file that initial security alert at each one of the agencies, you can ask that to be extended to Equifax and or TransUnion. Depending on the circumstances, you may have to do it individually, but you can also, in some cases, extend it across. Next slide. So the found evidence of fraud, we're going to conduct an investigation. We're going to contact the source of the contact information and make sure. So if you're saying, hey, this mortgage company or this insurance company put this on my credit report and it's wrong, we're going to go deal with that source. We're going to find out the information, and we're going to work with you to be able to try to correct that information and update it. It may require you to be on the phone with us, because sometimes creditors will not talk to us without the consumer being on the phone, and we may ask for additional documentation, but your credit reporting agency is there to help you fix issues with your credit report. Next slide. So you can extend your fraud alert to a 7-year fraud alert. This is it's a longer period of time. It asks lenders to call before granting credit, and it can also be shared across all 3 bureaus. So during this process, if you are a victim, and again, Carissa said that she was a victim. Carissa, have you added a 7-year fraud alert to your files?
I was just wondering, is this letter that I just sent to the IRS in Fresno, California, if it is part of this 7-year fraud statement? I'm not sure. I just had to write down who I thought did it, the address of where they were, and then what happened and what year, things like that. Sign it and send it off.
It's probably not, because that's probably
Okay.
just limited to the IRS and a specific request. So I would say, as a follow-up to this webinar here, to reach out to Experian. And again, what you can do is when you get your free Identity Works membership that I'm going to give out through Dress for Success, you can contact the fraud resolution agent and they can actually walk you through and place that 7-year fraud alert on your file.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to that because someone has a whole house in my name.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, you're a great poster child for this webinar. I'm sorry you've had to go through this, but it's a great indicator to your
Oh, I was
fellow
looking
webinar
forward.
attendees.
Yes, thank you so much. Even for that year, I'm looking forward to it. And even while I'm unmuted, everyone should take advantage because it can happen to you.
Well, thank you. Let's go on to the next slide. And this is the summary of the fraud alert. So you have the initial fraud alert that's good for 1 year. You have a 7-year fraud alert. And then also, if you happen to also be a member of the military, there's an active duty fraud alert that we can also place, and that stays on for 12 months. So that's the summary of the fraud alerts, and they're helpful. So let's keep going. One more audience poll question. Freezing your credit file prevents everyone, and I will underline everyone, from getting access to your credit report. True or false? Split decisions here. Lot of number of trues, more falses. The trick is everyone. Well, a credit freeze on your file will stop every new creditor from getting access to your file and putting something on there. But if you look at this first sub bullet point, a security freeze prevents your credit information from being accessed unless you have an existing relationship. So if I've already got an auto loan with GM and they come and they say, I want to access Mike Bremer's file because we've already got a relationship, they can. It's only new creditors or creditors you've never done business with. So a credit freeze is a really good thing, but it's not absolutely foolproof, because we don't want to shut down that people that you already have credit with are able to access. So just so you know that. All right, next slide. So here's information in terms of being able to, how to request a security freeze. You have to do it with each individual agency. It talks about Experian. Obviously, there's certain state laws depending on the, if it's a minor you're asking for a freeze for, some of the documentation needs to be sent in. And then all of this can be done. A credit freeze doesn't cost you anything, and you can freeze and unfreeze that credit if you're applying for, let's say, a new mortgage or an auto loan. But I recommend for most people to put a credit freeze on all their files. I'd have one with Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. I have the ability to take it off for 72 hours and put it back on, but it is a really good way to be able to go ahead and protect yourself. And again, the fraud resolution specialist, if you have more in-depth questions about that, once you get your membership and you sign up for it, they can help you into the details of putting that freeze on at each one of the credit reporting agencies. Question was asked, what's the cost of Identity Works after the first year? The average cost is about $150 a year for a retail membership. So you're getting at least $150 annual value, what I'm going to provide each one of you, and I will get those to you through Dress for Success. All right, let's go on to the next page talks about processing freezes. You'll have to have a PIN provided to you by that credit reporting agency, and you'll use that PIN to freeze and unfreeze. And there's more information about that. Let's go on to the next slide. And again, there's no charge for doing that. The one thing you got to remember is just make sure you hold on to your PIN, because if you lose your PIN, it may take a couple weeks before they send you a PIN in the mail. And I know some people have gotten caught out where their credit file is frozen. They needed to get it open and they had to wait an extended period of time and had to postpone getting that brand new shiny Chevrolet at the car dealership. Next slide. Let's skip this one. This just talks about the battle can it be won. It's a group, but here's the last slide of my deck before we open it up for additional questions. And this is just general fraud assistance and other resources that were used by my colleague Rod to pull together the presentation. He actually does a weekly credit chat live. And then at Experian, there's a credit education site and consumer education. All of these will have some great free resources. And finally, the Identity Works membership is another resource with that fraud resolution agent. You're going to get access to your Experian credit report, and you'll be able to get that on a daily basis. You'll be able to get monitoring 24/7. You'll get $1 million worth of identity theft protection insurance, as well as you're also going to get access for as long as you need it to an identity theft restoration specialist. None of this will cost you anything, and there'll be additional help above and beyond the free resources that I just talked about.